Greetings, this is I, Tantus Nav and Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue our discussion on EARTHDAWN. We were talking about skills last time. Today I'm going to dive into some of the basics of magic, and I apologize if this one's a little slow one, but this is an important one to talk about, but it's going to be very metaphysical in the way that EARTHDAWN looks at magic and understands it. So magic is an integral part of any of your character's very nature. It's going to be intrinsically built into their bodies and is going to be manipulated by them in order to have their abilities. Magic within the EARTHDAWN universe ebbs and flows within a 5,000 year cycle where it kind of goes up to a high point and then goes down to a low point, and it keeps repeating this cycle. It is known from ancient texts, barely that survived, that there have been cycles like this before, and during these high points, creatures like the horrors can enter into our plane from their various metaplanes. There's enough magic in the world that they can attack it, and scourge-like things occur. Now, the scourge was supposed to last for a certain amount of years when people were estimating how the levels of magic existed in it. Scholars were. But the scourge ended abruptly. There was a sudden sort of drop-off of magic that occurred that caused the scourge to end. And scholars thought that either that would mean that magic was going to be dropping off more rapidly, or it would just have this quick drop and then go back to its normal sort of status. But magic has been about static for around 90 years now. So it's been very unusual that no one knows really why that's 90 years magic has been completely static. And it's pretty much since the fall and the end of the scourge occurred that it has kind of leveled out at this point in time. It's scholars studying the ebb and flow of magic could spend lifetimes trying to understand its intrinsic nature and the matter of it. Let us talk more about magic, because magic is based all around patterns. Everything in the world has a pattern. A pattern on something has to do with its physical and metaphysical nature of it. So you have living things that have patterns, objects has patterns, everything has patterns. And most patterns will going to maintain static throughout their lifetime, throughout their existence. And only when it comes into play with magic or people manipulating magical energies do patterns change. They can alter the very nature of these patterns using magic. Now, just because everything has a pattern doesn't mean it's as important as everybody else. There are things called true patterns. True patterns are a solidification of the magical energies of something that make it effectively a unique and individual thing beyond everything else. So my bed might have a pattern, but I myself will have a true pattern. Things in the EARTHDAWN universe that have true patterns are things that are named. True patterns can exist in people, places, and items. They are strong magical sources that are actually reads of all the magical interactions and energies and history that exist within this pattern. You can use a true pattern to understand what kind of magical interactions it's had throughout its history, for one thing, what kind of magic in and itself it could manipulate if it's a person or an item, and the kind of essence of what magic exists within the thing that you have the pattern for. Naming something is where the true pattern can kind of solidify. Of course, you come from naming a person, which you would usually do at birth, gives them their unique essence and pattern. People usually just keep the same name throughout their lives because of this, because there's a unique pattern to it that reflects the magic energies of the world. When someone would change their name, their actual name, and rename themselves, very often they would lose much of their old essences. So for example, if an adept renamed themselves, they would no longer be of the discipline they were before. They could start over from scratch. They would reinvent themselves, and they might not even remember some things of their old selves because of the magical nature of the true pattern within them. There are rumors that you can somehow keep your essence while renaming yourself, but it's never been truly proven that there is some kind of effects or rituals that can do this. Of course, people will take on nicknames or monikers as a way of referring to yourself, but it does not change the fact that you have an actual name that you were given. Now, places can also have a true pattern. A place that has a true pattern is traditionally a place that's been associated with great magic, with some kind of powerful thing like a death or a battle, that it has been given a name. You can, of course, get a place that has a true pattern that has effectively caused itself to do that by some kind of effect going there. It's sort of a natural occurrence of it. But someone naming a place will also solidify a true pattern within that location also. So you can find that there's oftentimes this want to name things that people try to prevent you from doing because it prevents true patterns from being formed. Of course, it is not encouraged to name a place after a certain person or a certain kind of other pattern, other true pattern, because when you name it after that, then the true pattern of that place mimics it, and oftentimes can be used to sort of understand what the pattern of the original was by studying the pattern of that place. So it creates an intrinsic connection between the two of them by giving effectively a very similar name or the same name. Now, items can also have names. An item that has name is oftentimes you're going to imbue it when you're creating something that's very powerful that has magical energies. If you create a magical item, you want to give it a name and give it a true pattern, because then it will solidify the magical energies within said magic weapon. An adept that has some kind of magic item or makes one will oftentimes, of course, name it, or will find one that has a name because that means it has those powers solidified within it. You can name magical items, and there is some kind of intrinsic love of it, and it oftentimes means it's a personal item. But unfortunately, in the case of that, it also kind of leaves yourself a little open, because the patterns in that are much weaker, the sort of true pattern you're building into these non-magical items, and so that way someone could use that in order to sort of access information about your own pattern, because it is weaker and more mimicking your own. Pattern knowledge would be the study of a pattern to try to attempt to learn everything it is to know about that. Oftentimes, true patterns are made up of smaller key patterns, key knowledges about them, that these little keys form together to form whatever the true pattern is. And understanding each of these keys individually is something that oftentimes someone that is attempting to learn pattern knowledge is going to end up doing. With pattern knowledge, you are studying the pattern to try to learn about it, to try to learn what kind of magical interactions it has, what kind of magical abilities it has, everything you need to know about that. And oftentimes it could take lifetimes to learn everything about an individually true pattern. Learning about even one of the key factors about it could take a lifetime in and of itself of study and trying to understand and decipher it, especially some of the more complex and deeper rooted true patterns that exist in the world. So it is a matter of attempting to study these key points and learn as much as you can about them, about this pattern, and giving access to these key points is oftentimes what you want to aim to do. Learning all of them is not an impossibility. It is just incredibly rare to be able to learn everything about it, and therefore learn everything you can know about this true pattern in its deep essence, and everything that could possibly be known about it. Of course, the easiest one of all of them to learn is the name, which in and of itself is a key knowledge to a pattern, a true pattern. And learning that name is actually the easiest one to possibly even try to dive into and understanding it. But even in the name, there are more deeper connotations oftentimes about who named it, why it's named that way, things like that, that make it more than just a single word or single sentence. Now let's talk about pattern items, because pattern items exist, and they are kind of intrinsic items that are linked to a pattern by either choice or accident. And there are three types of pattern items. They will oftentimes sort of be linked to a true pattern and reflect it in various ways. If a troubadour oftentimes uses a certain instrument or certain item for all of their performances, it will oftentimes form itself into a pattern item, because either by choice or by just the fact that it's been used for all these magical and intrinsic abilities, a sort of magical pattern is kind of weaved into it that mimics the true pattern that it's based upon. Minor ones, as I said, are the easiest ones to get, and oftentimes they're created more than accident, more than on purpose. It could be something as simple as a wizard's walking staff, which has kind of become a minor pattern item. A minor pattern item has no intrinsic defensive abilities or any kind of magical abilities to it, and is created by almost the will of magic, it seems, that oftentimes that they will be created. Now, major pattern items are a little more tough. They exist a little more rare. More than often, they are created by someone to be used as a manipulating object, though there is something that they're going to use very often. There are times that they're accidentally created, but it is incredibly rare. A minor pattern item can become a major pattern item if you choose to use it and sort of concentrate your abilities into it, especially if you're using it over a large period of time. A major pattern item actually has some kind of defensive abilities in the intrinsic magic of it. It's harder to destroy, not impossible to destroy, not indestructible, not for sure, but it is much harder to destroy than many other items that exist out there. Major pattern items almost always have this sort of psychological rather than physiological or metaphysical kind of connection that they've created these need for this kind of pattern item. Now, there are core pattern items, which are even step above major pattern items. Again, a major pattern item could evolve itself into a core pattern item if you use it for long enough. These are even rarer to be created just by chance, and it is the majority of are created through people concentrating their abilities in order to create in the first place. Again, these are hard to destroy, and they are again almost indestructible, but they can be destroyed. Now granted, it is again a reflection of the true pattern of who created it, so it is a kind of weak point in the fact that someone could use a core pattern item to read someone's true pattern without having actually access to them. Now there are some advantages though. A core pattern item has a sort of aura of luck around it that gives it advantageous situations to it itself and its yielder at the time. Sort of if I'm holding onto it, not only would it would have basically advantageous luck when trying to avoid getting destroyed. That's an extra thing that helps keep it from being destroyed. Of course, if I'm in the way of something and with it, that means I also have a very good chance of having this luck of this item rub off on myself. The other advantageous thing is should it be destroyed by any chance or by random chance, you can recreate it actually. You can take between a day to a year to recreate a core pattern item that would function exactly the same way as the other. So it's sort of that intrinsic kind of powerful sort of mirror of your own pattern that you've created. You can transfer it from the broken item to a new one. So that's it for today. I talked a little bit about the history of magic in the world, the ebbs and flows of it, and I talked a lot about patterns and true patterns, pattern items and pattern knowledges, all the things you may not really need to know, but it's good to know to understand the basics of how magic is weaved together within the EARTHDAWN universe. In the next episode, I will talk threads, and then I will talk about astral space and astral sensing. So if you have questions, comments, anything we say, anything you think got left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel, the empire, and the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can check out my Patreon, linked in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.